Victor Wembanyama is a player that just doesn't feel real. I've been watching him play basketball for years now and still feel that way. He's been a highly touted prospect basically since I started making basketball content back in 2019. He's someone who has had a really touted label on him since he was 16 years old. He's been considered the best prospect in the world since he was that age, and for good reason. It wasn't just hype. From a skill perspective and a physical tool perspective, he has all the upside in the world and always has had all the upside in the world. And he's somebody that just showed signs at an age where you don't expect those signs to be there. And I remember the first time I watched his tape because I didn't believe that he was actually a real person, let alone a real basketball prospect, because I just thought that the idea of what he was too good to be true. And honestly, I thought my draft and basketball friends were pulling a prank on me. But turns out he actually does exist, and to my shock, I found out the 7'3", 16-year-old prospect was everything my friends told me he was, and maybe even then some. A player that could legitimately dominate both ends of the floor one day, and had guard-like skills. And it wasn't just the fact that it was impressive because he was tall. It was just impressive in general. But even then, if you told me as an 18-year-old back in 2020, watching Victor Wembanyama play basketball, that 2 years from now, this demigod of basketball would be even taller and also a significantly better basketball player in 2022. I would have called you crazy at the time, but here we are now. Now, here's the thing. It's not just that his skills are very good for a basketball player that's nearly 7'5" in shoes. He's definitely taller than his listed 7'3" or 7'2", depending on the site. He would be a top 2 player in the draft if he was 6'10" or 6'9" or 6'8", which is still pretty tall. But it's also like 6 to 7 inches shorter, maybe even more than that, than what he actually is. The handle, shot creating ability, and creativity as an offensive player are special regardless of height. On top of that, he is also a player that I feel like on defense, it's not just about physical tools. I do think that being that tall and having an 8-foot wingspan, as well as great movement skills, do help out a lot. And they are the reason why he is a generational defensive prospect, just like he is a generational offensive prospect. But his feel for the game as a defender is what makes him so special. He's an elite shot blocker and has good foul discipline. He can drop, switch, hedge, basically play any defensive coverage you want, and he's extremely smart on that end of the floor. Now, if you want to talk about quote-unquote flaws in his game, I do think he needs to get stronger. He does struggle with contact a bit. And I also think his shot selection is at the learning the difference between being capable of hitting tough shots versus tough shots being necessary or not in an offensive situation, which is very common for a teenager at this stage of their basketball development. Also, I do think that this being the first time he's really had freedom like this on offense is a factor as well. But even with the shot selection, it's just a natural part of development, and his efficiency numbers are still pretty good, despite the fact that I do think that sometimes he settles for jumpers a bit too much because he has that ability, but it may not be the best thing for the offense. At the end of the day, with Wembanyama's flaws, it's a lot of things that I'm confident are fixable. NBA training programs are among the best in the world, and they have a really good track record of helping young players gain functional strength and fill out their frames. On top of that, he's young, and you have to remember, not every 18 or 19-year-old is going to enter the league looking like Zion Williamson or DeAndre Ayton or Jalen Duren or AJ Griffin. And again, with shot selection, it's just something I think will naturally improve as he gains more experience. Now, this might be a hot take, but I believe that the foundation of Victor Wembanyama's game should be focused around traditional drop big offense like a Rudy Gobert. I'm not saying he should be limited to that role by any means and should only be a lob threat and dump off guy and just do what Rudy Gobert does in offense and average like 15 points a game. Not even close to that. But at the same time, he can be unstoppable as a lob threat and a dump off guy, especially when he adds strength to his frame. And for as out of this world as the perimeter skills are with him, I also think that his height, athleticism, and skills are things that are going to make his scoring ability around the basket very unstoppable, including as a slasher due to his handle, body control, and touch around the basket. And of course, those traditional drop big skills on offense as well. I am of the belief that a player's offense should be centered around what they can do most efficiently. And while Wemby is a great perimeter player, his traditional big skills and scoring around the basket are what I believe is going to be most efficient. So I do think that should be the core of his offense. Now, I'm not disregarding his perimeter skills by any stretch of the imagination because they are important for his game. But I think my vision of what he can be at his best is a player that focuses around the fact that teams aren't going to be able to handle a player that can be unstoppable around the basket in scoring scenarios and has the counter of being an elite perimeter player if teams figure out how to defend him around the basket. And when he adds more strength to his frame, I think his ceiling as a player around the basket goes up significantly. Wemby will be a player that can take quicker, smaller defenders off the dribble to the basket as a slasher and just finish over them and dump off and lob scenarios. And when you put those stronger, bigger defenders on him, he can take those guys off the dribble and create separation and hit the jumpers because they aren't going to have the movement skills to keep up with him in that regard. On top of that, he's growing as a passer, which is most intriguing to me. He's far from perfect in this area, but the signs are there that he can be a good passer, and given his work ethic, motor, and wiring as a player, I am confident he can improve in this area to a point he can consistently read defensive coverages and understand his scoring gravity. He's a complete mismatch, and words can't describe how high his offensive ceiling is. This is a player that can be dominant in all facets of scoring from both a skill standpoint and an athleticism standpoint, on top of having a massive frame advantage. And even that description might not do it justice. Victor Wembanyama is a generational prospect. That much is clear. His combination of physical tools, athleticism, skill, feel for the game, motor, and wiring is something I have never seen before. He's the apex of what a unicorn in basketball is. He has no ceiling as a player because you can't set a ceiling on something like this. He's the peak evolution of what the modern day big is. Every iteration of the quote-unquote unicorn big prospect that I've watched on tape, I've walked away thinking that there can be improvement and they can get better in areas and be more than what they are now. From Don Maker to Bol to a much lesser extent guys like Evan Mobley, Chet Holmgren, a younger Wembanyama even, and Jaren Jackson Jr. Yes, I consider him a unicorn prospect. Sue me. All of them, I felt like things about their game could be worked on, and they could get better. For watching this version of Victor Wembanyama, it's hard for me to believe that there is a better version of what he is now. Even though I'm almost 100% certain he is going to be a lot better in the NBA than he is as a pre-draft prospect. But the idea of it being a reality is something that's just not clicking in my head because I've never seen anything like what Victor Wembanyama is now. So it's hard for me to see what it could be when he's even better than he is now. So he can get stronger, improve his shot selection, and be a bit more efficient from three, which I think is also tied to shot selection more than pure ability. But those are things I think he can improve on naturally, and I'll be honest with you, those things are nitpicks that are more about things that he could work on, but they aren't things that hold his game back. Every time I watch Victor Wembanyama play, I ask myself, what isn't he capable of? Sure, he's not perfect at everything right now. No player is perfect. But I truly struggle to look at the tape and think of anything he's not capable of doing to a certain extent on the basketball court. He has everything you look for in a franchise player. The talent and potential to be dominant on both ends of the floor. The mindset to be a franchise player who wants to take over games and be great. Victor carries himself like he's the best in the world, and he has the game to back it up. The only prospect I was this confident in being a star in the league was Luka Doncic, who's a generational prospect in his own right, and the only prospect I've evaluated that I would have ahead of Victor, but that's another story for another time. But if you don't believe me, just a guy on the internet that likes basketball and making videos about the sport, well, you don't have to listen to me because I'm not the only one that thinks Victor is that good. Damian Lillard called him generational and said he never has seen anything like him before. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the best player in the NBA, talked about him like a mythological being. He said he has never seen anything like Victor in his life, saying he blocks shots like Gobert and shoots the basketball like KD, and if you ask me, that's a pretty unstoppable player. LeBron James himself called Victor generational, and LeBron is one of the few prospects ever you can argue was better than Victor as a prospect. Everyone knows how special Victor is. Fans know it, scouts know it, players know it, and most importantly, he knows it. But what makes it all so scary is that he's just getting started. And what he's about to do to the NBA is something that I can't comprehend. It doesn't feel right, because it doesn't seem possible.